These are forces that are very directly working with the United States of America, that have tried to facilitate coups. Everyone becomes American.
That's not true in the UK, though, unfortunately. So if you look at, for example...
I know you won't agree with me on this.
It's not about whether I agree, it's about whether the facts agree with you.
I don't think that's the case.
Hold on.
I think ultimately...
Well, let me just give you some facts, then. If that, we have a terrorist attack on a monthly basis.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. I absolutely had to cover this video. Hasan Piker recently went on trigonometry and he made some pretty outrageous claims. And I mean, it's interesting to watch Hasan doing a somewhat contentious interview. I mean, they could have definitely given him a tougher time, but fair enough, you want to be respectful to your guests. I would like to see him do some actual debates, because the best way to kill an idea or to prove yours is to demonstrate the truth of your claims through debate. But anyways, that is a side note. With that, let's get into the first portion.
Hasan, I've got a lot of empathy for some of your positions, particularly when you talk about low-skilled labour. So, for context, my mother is a Venezuelan immigrant to the UK. When she was in the UK, she was a childminder. There was no minimum wage. My mum, roughly, I remember earning £2.20 an hour. There were no pension rights. So, thankfully, like, I help my parents out. My dad helps my mum out, so she's not destitute. But that's what my mum's position would be if she didn't have me or my father. As somebody who is from Venezuela, I worry when people mention socialism because I've seen what's happened to my country. How would you assuage the fears of people like me or people who come from a Cuban background who've seen the socialist dream, as it were, descend into authoritarianism?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that all countries, to varying degrees, engage in authoritarianism in general. It's just something that it's a function of the government. It obviously has the capacity to get out of hand due to external factors in many instances, like combating much more powerful forces that want to cause instability in your country. It's not a justification for it, but it is analysis in terms of like why these guys engage in the actions that they do, in terms of suppression of all dissent, or even censorship, and sometimes even jail time. And the example I always use is the United States of America, not only in the Cold War, but even preceding the Cold War, during World War I and World War II, actually had a practice of jailing all conscientious objectors, for example, who said, I don't want to fight in this war. They were like, all right, well, this is a world war, sucks to suck, you're going to jail. One of the famous examples is Eugene Debs, a socialist who actually ran from prison, and I think achieved like 1.3 million votes at the time, which was probably the most electoral success socialists had ever achieved. He was a conscientious objector of World War I, which was the international Marxist position at the time. There was some deviation there. So I see it in a similar vein when these countries also engage in authoritarian actions, suppressing dissent, censorship, or trying to manage this dynamic of trying to continue doing governance, while at the same time they have to like make sure that they're avoiding American intervention or Western intervention in general. As far as the fears that people have, assuaging the fears that people have in terms of what they've seen in their countries, whether it be Venezuela or Cuba, I think each country is different. Each successful and unsuccessful revolution is different. And I think it's important to understand the lessons and the failures, as well as some of the areas of success that these countries have been able to implement. Avoid the failures and try to focus on the successes, and hopefully you'll be able to have a long-standing and relatively happy form of governance.
I mean, I take your point as to the conscientious objector, but you look at Venezuela, for example.
Just before we move on with this, I need to tell you guys about the sponsor of today's video, Black Forest Supplements. Dump this brown powder into your coffee and become 27% harder to kill. This is Black Forest's high flavonol cocoa. And in a study of over 21,000 people, researchers found that cocoa flavonols can reduce your risk of heart attack by up to 27%. Here's the key. Cocoa flavonols keep your arteries flexible. But with regular chocolate, 90% of flavonols get destroyed during the process. Total difference maker. Harvard even ran the biggest study ever, the Cosmos trial. So I'm going to show you a video of Dr. Eric Berg, one of the most watched health educators on YouTube, speaking about this. He's been talking about the benefits of cocoa flavonols for years.
Benefits of cacao and dark chocolate. There's some seriously amazing benefits for the heart. Decreased blood pressure because you're getting increased nitric oxide, which actually helps the smooth muscle of the arteries. Now, the blood pressure effect can also happen due to the high levels of magnesium. It's also loaded with iron and potassium and copper and phosphorus and zinc. Number two, It can increase your HDL, decrease your LDL, especially the oxidized LDL. Number 3, major studies showing the decrease in risk of heart disease. Okay, this is the big one right here. Decreasing endothelial dysfunction. This is where heart disease starts. It's the inside of the layer of the artery, specifically the coronary, that starts to become damaged, and then the cholesterol comes and the calcium comes and builds up plaquing and a clot. And so these antioxidants protect the inside layer of the artery.
So that's why I switched to Black Forest. It's not candy, it's performance fuel. I put a scoop in my coffee every morning, and within minutes, I'm awake, focused, and dialed in. It just hits different. And right now, guys, Black Forest is running their biggest deal of the year. Buy one, get one free across the whole entire store, but only for the next 48 hours. And I mean, cocoa prices are exploding all across the world, so this deal will not last very long. Hit the link pinned at the top of the comments and in the bio, Black Forest Supplements /Jake, and grab this amazing Black Friday deal while it still lasts and take control of your health. Now, let's get back to the video.
But you look at Venezuela, for example, and then the reason I'm using it is because that's the example I know best.
Yeah.
You know, you've got rigged elections. You've got politicians who go up against Maduro. They're either thrown in jail, as in the case of Leopoldo Lopez, solitary confinement for 2 years, or you have, I think it's Corina Machado, who got nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, but she is currently in hiding in her own country because she knows the moment that her whereabouts are known, she's going to get thrown into jail, may not be seen again.
Yeah. I'm not going to defend Maduro, but I would say that the logical through line, and it's important to understand the opposition's logical through line in this instance, is that these are forces that are very directly working with the United States of America, that have tried to facilitate coups, even had an unsuccessful one all the way back in 2002 with Chavez, and numerous other instances, openly talked about implementing coups under the first Trump administration, and is openly now waging war, or at least threatening to wage war with Venezuela right now, encircling the entire coastline of Venezuela with some of the most sophisticated weaponry known to man. In that regard, I think they see it as treason. I would go so far as say, in a similar scenario in the United States of America, I think, and this is not even a one-to-one dynamic because America is the most powerful nation on the planet, but China is getting up there, right? Let's see if China had, if in a hypothetical, if China had encircled the United States of America, and let's say in this hypothetical, I'm like very clearly someone who is going to China and talking to the CPC and saying like, we want Chinese intervention in this country because I hate Donald Trump, please. I think in that regard, America would probably treat me in the exact same way, if not in a worse way, ironically enough.
So I actually don't mind what Hasan said at the beginning there. All nation states, by their nature, are somewhat authoritarian. This is true. But the unfortunate part for Hasan is that socialism and communism, by their nature, result in the government actually having more and more power. Socialism is meant to mean that the government owns the means of production, and communism is meant to theoretically follow, which would mean that the people own the means of production. They just never seem to really reach that part, because governments just never give up control of power. Interesting that. So all of the communist countries around the world or throughout history, or all of the nominally communist countries, were actually just top-down state-controlled totalitarian societies. But I mean, their goals, a great many requiring serious government intervention, require a higher threshold of government authority compared to capitalist societies, be they socially liberal or conservative. But anyways, in this next part, Hasan gets confronted with the actual facts about immigration.
What I always find interesting is when people focus on the newcomers, to say that this is actually destroying the social fabric or social cohesion, not realizing that there are a ton of polls conducted on this stuff. I can just speak for America, especially, where by the second generation, assimilation is almost complete. And by the third one, it's like virtually impossible to distinguish in terms of performance, educational output, and job performance in general. It's just like everyone becomes American.
That's not true in the UK, though, unfortunately. So if you look at, for example, Islamist radicalization, second and third generation Muslims are much more radical than first generation.
Yeah.
So we're not, that's the issue that a lot of people in Britain are concerned about, is not everyone's assimilating the way that the three of us have done.
So here's the interesting point about that. Well, two things I want to address. First, like I said, people assimilate, and they become a part of the
some people
normal forces of society. They become a part of the culture, or they bring some aspect of their culture into British culture, you know, they change the cuisine and people seemingly enjoy it, even if they also simultaneously go attend an EDL rally and then, you know, get a little quick curry afterwards or a little kebab on the side. But beyond that, the reason why people are angry is always going to be because the trains are not running on time, because the NHS is improperly managed due to underfunding. That's what I believe. I think it's always an issue of underfunding, where they're not getting the same services that they once used to, and also things are becoming more and more costly. So in that anger, it's much easier for them to be guided by a guided by the right-wing forces to turn around and say, you're angry and you're right to be angry. And the reason why you're angry, the reason why all of these things are happening is because we are importing all of these random strangers into the country who don't speak your language, who you are scared by. And that, I think, causes division, and it causes friction that makes it harder for people to integrate. And that is part of the reason why I think, especially in a place like the UK, you see a little bit more of this resilience towards full-blown integration into society.
I also think as well, Hasan, if we're being honest, it's also because we have had such huge amounts of immigration come into the country that people understandably go, this pace of change is too much. And you have to think, let's go back to 2016, which was the Brexit referendum. Now, Brexit was about many things, but really it was about people wanting immigration to be lowered. And that was 9 or 10 years ago. Immigration hasn't been lowered. In fact, it's been ratcheted up. So people people voted to lower immigration. And for instance, I voted Remain. People voted Brexit. I'm like, well, that's democracy. We get on. We're going to make the best of it. I do believe that when you ignore people's wishes at the ballot box and people explicitly vote for something and you ignore them for the best part of a decade, that does generate a lot of anger, and understandably so.
Yeah, I think in that same time frame, if there was enough appetite by the government to address the financial harm that people were experiencing, the economic struggles that people were experiencing, there would still be a lot of people who say, I don't want a brown person, or I don't want a black person around in my neighborhood. But ultimately, those numbers would be far smaller. And that's what I always go back to. I'm a leftist. I believe in economic improvements, and I believe that a lot of the reactionary forces actually take advantage of that instability, the economic volatility that exists, in an effort to shift the attention away to people who have the same exact interests as you and I do. Because ultimately, I don't believe that anyone is coming into the United States of America or the UK, as a matter of fact, because they want to bring about a Salafist-style Islamic caliphate in London. I know you won't agree with me on this.
It's not about whether I agree. It's about whether the facts agree with you.
I don't think that's the case.
Hold on.
I think ultimately,
let me just give you some facts then. If we have a terrorist attack on a monthly basis by an Islamist, effectively, we just had 2 in the space of the last month as we're recording this. 33%, I think, of British Muslims want Sharia law in Britain, like according to polls. More than half want to ban.
I haven't seen these polls.
Well, we can put them in for people to see. More than half want to ban homosexuality, right? So when you say people aren't coming in to introduce an Islamist stuff, well, some of them want to if they're in a position to do so. We have 5 MPs who are effectively elected on a sectarian ticket, like as in we are Muslims, vote for us because you're a Muslim.
Who would you say those MPs are?
The 5 independent MPs. They're called the Gaza MPs, or whatever way you want to call them. Right?
Are you talking about like Zara Sultana?
I don't know if she's one of them. I think one of them is called Adnan Hussein. There's 5 of them. We can look them up. We can put them in for people to see. Right. So I think it should be said that the overwhelming majority of British Muslims don't want Sharia law. But if 33% of them do, you can see why a lot of people who don't want Sharia law might be concerned about that, right?
Sure. I don't know what I haven't seen these polls, and I also don't know what British Muslims, or the 33% that are saying they want Sharia law, like what they're talking about.
So Konstantin makes a fantastic point here, and he's a guy who really knows what he's talking about when it comes to British immigration and when it comes to integration of these immigrants. I mean, he wrote a book about this. I've interviewed him about this very thing. So if third world British Muslims want Sharia law, that is a dangerous minority that needs to be expelled or integrated. Sharia law and English common law, I don't need to tell you, are thoroughly different practices. And not only in the laws that they're applying, but in their fundamental structure. And the most damaging statistic here that Konstantin mentions is that the second generation immigrants are more radical. I mean, integration and proper assimilation takes time, and Britain, America, Australia, and most of Europe have had too much, too quick, and not nearly enough time, especially since they have mass Islamic immigration, a religion where they can do just about anything as long as it's in service to their faith. This is just a foolish thing for Western nations to be doing, because immigration must happen below the rate of assimilation. And the longer it takes the people to actually realize this, and the longer it takes the liberals to realize that their liberal dream is going to be destroyed as well as the conservative Christian dream, then the longer it will take to actually be able to ever remedy this problem. But let's move on.
My concern is as well, and it's the rhetoric that is getting ratcheted up on both sides, both on the right, but both on the left. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. In my own country, we have Zara Sultana, who's a very prominent left-wing politician. She said the words, we need to fight the fascists in Parliament. Like, okay. We need to fight them in the ballot box, and we need to fight them in the streets. Now, the problem is, if you ask most people what fascism is, I don't think they would be able to give you a clear or coherent explanation or an analysis of the political ideology.
Well, let's be honest, by fascist, she means people like Reform who are not fascist. They are a centre-right party. They're not fascist.
So I don't know if I'd agree with that.
Right, but the point.
Well, hold on a second. You think the Reform Party is?
I think
fascist?
Reform Party, as it stands currently, is a nascent fascist parliamentary group that hasn't reached its full potential yet.
Could you define
in the same way that I would
fascism in this instance?
In the same way that I would say the modern Republican Party is or was throughout most of its history a liberal party, a far right but liberal party nonetheless, and it is becoming an illiberal or post-liberal party that is moving in the direction of fascism. Fascism is what's the best definition for it? Paleogenetic ultranationalism, a in-group out-group dynamic that is constantly seeking to destroy the out-group and dominate the out-group, even if the out-group is actually a part of civilized society, and surrounding itself with this like mythologized understanding of this national or ethnic or religious mythology of the higher group.
But it would also include authoritarianism, the end of a one-party state, like all of these.
Not always, but yeah, usually. Usually, yes.
So by which of those standards would you say Reform is a fascist or I can't remember how you said, a nascent fascist party?
Well, the reason why I say that is because, I mean, Mussolini's fascist party was not a party that I mean, Mussolini's fascist party was an active fascist party within the parliament before it became the centralized form of governance.
But they said we are fascists, right?
I know, but that was because the word fascism was just being invented at that point, and therefore it was still packaged as like a revolutionary, new, illiberal way.
Okay,
they didn't come into power. We now live in the post-World War II universe where like you can't say that you're fascist.
So you think
So Francis made a good point there at the start. Most people couldn't define fascism if asked, and that is absolutely true. And I don't think that Hasan fully knows either. He seems to be using fascist here as a stand-in for authoritarian. This just isn't correct, though he does get closer than your run-of-the-mill liberal. And I mean, I'm no expert in the nuances and the micros of British politics, but I can pretty safely say that Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, is not a nascent fascist party. And here's the problem. These people are the reason why words like fascist lose meaning, just like racist and just like anti-Semitism and these words that are just overly used and thrown at everything. At its core, fascism is an ideology that seeks to dissolve the individual into a metaphysical whole. The nation is an organic unity of the will of the state. It rejects the universalism of liberalism and socialism, presenting itself as a third position, where class conflict is supposedly erased through total subordination to the collective will embodied by the state. And also, to say it's a nascent fascist party is just such a cop-out. This is when somebody actually can't prove what they're saying, so they just say, well, this is the seedbed of fascism. It's not fascism yet, but trust me, bro, it will be. So let's move on to the last section.
So you think that if Nigel Farage, which is currently they're leading the polls, you think that if he is elected, eventually he will suspend democracy, he will start pogroms against Muslims, using the state, he will, you know, have a one-party state. You think that's what this is heading?
Bearing in mind that the chairman of Reform Party, Zia Yusuf, is a Muslim.
Yeah, still doesn't matter. I mean, there was Jews that
that's
worked
why you
within
think
there was
headed.
Jews that worked within the Nazi government command structure as well. It's just like there are always going to be people that come from they come from the background of the targeted out group in general, and it doesn't even end with Muslims, is what I mean. It's going to it always has to excise what it considers aberrations. And there is always, like with Nazi Germany, for example, the next stage, if they hadn't failed so dramatically in its endless militarism, would have most likely been to create the Übermensch structure, like the start going after people who were maybe brown-haired and didn't have blue eyes. Like there's an endless expansion of that sort.
And you think that's what reform will do? They'll suspend democracy, they'll start a one-party state.
I mean, this is super in the future if they actually get to that point, but I don't think that it is far-fetched to assume that, yes, reform through a process of initially reforms, I could totally see them getting to that position. Yes.
What's your basis for saying that, though?
It's entirely dependent on how material conditions unwind. If it gets to a point where there's tremendous economic stability, then instead of solving those issues in the same way that the American movement, the Trump movement, is not solving these issues, they will continue to be a force of political repression.
But what's your evidence for this? This is the thing I don't understand.
The evidence is the historical patterns that I'm looking at. The historical patterns of why fascism has been implemented in the past. And now, like I said, we live in a post-fascist world. We live in a nuclear world. The dynamic is different, okay? So the fascism will not come as a third way, as an outsider any longer. I think instead you will see far-right elements within liberal society, within the parliamentary structure, move in that direction.
But my worry with this is, and this is why I'm not trying to like debate bro you or anything. I'm genuinely engaging with what you're saying. I hope you feel that, right?
Yeah.
The issue I have in the context of the discussion we're having about Charlie Kirk is you've got a situation where you are calling reform fascists. I know some people in reform, they're not fascists. They don't believe in a one-party state. They don't want to end democracy, right? We've had Nigel Farage on our show. It's very clear where he's an old school Thatcherite kind of guy, right? But you're saying he's a fascist. And my worry is...
I think he will get there.
Okay, you're saying he will get to fascism. Fair.
If material conditions get to a point
I got it.
where there's mass instability in an effort to
It's a nascent fascist party that in the right context will become fascist. I get it, right?
And the same, not dissimilar to
but here's my
the
point.
AFD, the nationalists in France.
Reform is very different from the AFD, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
My point is this. If I thought the fascists were coming, I would feel it's my duty to participate in armed resistance against that. And my worry is part of where the political violence is coming from is people like you who are using this term, in my opinion, far too loosely and projecting historical analogies onto people that you're not that familiar with, actually. And then you're really putting a target on their back. And my worry is the reason Charlie Kirk was killed is there were far too many people calling him a fascist, which he wasn't, right? And That's my concern with all of this irresponsible language, which I think it is.
So, I mean, Hasan's ideas here, ironically, are actually the only ones at the table that would somewhat represent historically fascist ideas. But even then, I still wouldn't call him a fascist, because that just wouldn't be true. Fascism in the modern world is essentially dead in terms of a coherent political movement. And I can see why people on the right wing would call those on the left the real fascists. And I see why that would be an effective tool. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek because they're calling everybody a fascist and you say, well, no, you guys are the real fascists. That is an effective rhetorical tool. But I would say only in response to left-wing people calling the right-wing fascists. It's kind of just a way to mirror what they're actually seeing and to point out the hypocrisy. But I mean, when the left-wing point out any vague overlap with any historical position of fascist, and they paint Reform UK in this regard, I mean, it's just so lazy and reductive and quite uncharitable. And then saying under the right conditions is once again just such a cop-out. But anyways, I did enjoy that exchange. Hope Hasan does some more debates, because I do think that he does dodge the core issues and he throws labels around very carelessly. But anyways, that is all for today, guys. Don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, check out Black Forest supplements, of course, right down below there. Also, let me know what you think. If I missed anything, if you guys picked up anything that I didn't, please feel free to comment below. And if you'd like to watch another video, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.